I've dealt with lots of people who have anxiety disorders, you know. And one thing about people who have anxiety disorders is they are not mysterious to me. I understand, it's no problem for me to understand why people have anxiety disorders, or why they're depressed, or why they have substance use problems. The mystery to me is always why people don't have all of those things at once, because everybody has a reason to be anxious. In fact, we have the ultimate reason to be anxious because we know that we're vulnerable and we know that we're going to die. And how you cannot be anxious under those circumstances is a great mystery. It's a massive mystery. And the same thing applies with regards to depression. And then the same thing applies to some degree with regards to drug and alcohol abuse. As I said last week, there's plenty of reasons to drown your consciousness in alcohol, that's for sure. We could refer to the aforementioned anxiety and depression, not least. And so, and the sorts of drugs that people are prone to take are chemicals that take the affective edge off the tragedy of life. So back to the issue of fear. I mean, Abraham is self-conscious, that's what this commentary says, but the thing is he moves forward despite that. He's self-conscious and he knows the danger, but he moves forward despite that. And that's actually the appropriate response in the face of actual non-naive understanding of what constitutes life. Like if you're naive and you move forward, it's like, well, what the hell do you know? You know, there's no courage in naivety because you don't know what there is to stop you. You don't know what dangers you might apprehend. But to be aware of what it is that your problem is, so to be alert existentially, let's say, or to be fully self-conscious means that you're perfectly aware of your limitations and how you might be hurt. And then to make the decision to move forward into the unknown and the land of the stranger. Anyways, I would say that's one of the secrets to a good life. And I can say that really without fear of contradiction, I would say, because the clinical literature on this is very, very, very clear. What you do with people who are afraid, and to some degree depressed, but certainly anxious, is you lay out what they're anxious about, first of all, in detail. What is it that you're afraid of? What might happen? And then you decompose it into small problems, hypothetically manageable problems, and then you have the person expose themselves to the thing that they're afraid of, and what happens isn't that they get less afraid. That isn't what the clinical literature indicates exactly. What happens instead is they get braver. And that's not the same thing, right? Because if you get less afraid, it's like, well, the world isn't as dangerous as I thought it was, you know, silly me. If you get braver, that's not what happens. What happens is, yeah, the damn world's just as dangerous as I thought, or maybe it's even more dangerous than I thought, but it turns out that there's something in me that responds to taking that on as a voluntary challenge and grows and thrives as a consequence. And there's no doubt about this. Even the psychophysiological findings are quite clear. If you impose a stressor on two groups of people, and on one group the stressor is imposed involuntarily, and on the other group the stressor is picked up voluntarily, the people who pick up the stressor voluntarily use a whole different psychophysiological system to deal with it. They use the system that's associated with approach and challenge, and not the system that's associated with defensive aggression and withdrawal. And the system that is associated with challenge is much more associated with positive emotion and much less associated with negative emotion. It's also much less hard on you because the defensive posturing system, the prey animal system, man, when that thing kicks in, it's all systems are go for you, you know. The gas is pushed down to the pedals pushed down to the metal and the brakes are on. You're using future resources that you could be storing for future time right now in the present to ready yourself for emergency. So there's nothing simple or trivial at all about the idea of being called to move forthrightly forward into the strange and the unknown. And there's a real adventure that's associated with that, right? So that's an exciting thing, which is part of the reason why people travel. And then also to see yourself as the sort of creature that can do that, is willing to do that on a habitual basis, is also the right kind of tonic for, I hate this word, for your self-esteem. You know, because the self-esteem has nothing to do with feeling good about yourself. As I already mentioned, there isn't necessarily a reason why a priori you should just feel good about yourself. But if you can view yourself acting in a courageous and forthright manner and encountering the world and trying to improve your lot and taking risks, you know, in a non-naive way, well, then you have something that you can comfort yourself with at night when you're wondering what the whole damn point of is of your futile and miserable life. And so And that's necessary because it's often the case that you wake up at 4 in the morning, or at least sometimes the case that you wake up at 4 in the morning when things haven't been going that well and wonder just what the hell the point is of your futile and miserable life. You have to have something real to set against that. It can't be just rationalizations about how, you're a valuable person among others, even though that's true. That's not good enough. You need something that's more realistic to set against that. And observing courage in yourself is definitely one of the things that can help you sleep soundly at night when things are destabilized a little bit around you.
Hello, Dr. Peterson. I've been trying to listen to my conscience, but I can't tell the difference between fear, willful blindness, or genuine conscience. Well, the first thing I would say about that is it is quite clear that you are, in fact, trying to listen to your conscience, because that's probably the first thing that you discover. So that's a really good question. Okay. Fear. Well, here's a test, and you don't want to do this stupidly. If you think that you should do something, and you think that the reason you might not be doing it is because you're afraid, then you should do it. So that way you can find out if it's fear. I think your question is, well, how do I know my conscience isn't just masquerading as fear, saying, well, you shouldn't do that, but it's rationalizing the real issue, which is you're afraid of doing that. Now, see, here's a reason that you want to tell the truth. And I kind of figured this out when I was looking deeply into the Pinocchio story. In Pinocchio, as Pinocchio strives to become real, he has a conscience to guide him, but it's Jiminy Cricket, this insect. But Jiminy isn't really a very good conscience. He's a bit dogmatic to begin with, dogmatic and inexperienced. And so it's not like the conscience is an unerring guide. It's like a partner in discovery. And as you move forward in your life and you consult your conscience and you listen to it, then it gets smarter, and so do you. But there's a coda there, and this is why I've suggested, part of the reason why I've suggested so frequently in my lectures and in my book, that people try not to lie. You see, there are many systems, you have many systems within, let's say, that guide you. And one of those is your capacity for rational thought, and then you have a variety of emotional systems and motivational systems and internal dramas and intuitions and bodily sensations, like lots and lots of, and senses, lots of systems that are guiding you. And many of them operate, you might say, unconsciously, autonomously, instinctively, implicitly, all of that. Now, nonetheless, you program them, like you feed them content, let's say. Just like you feed your body nourishment, you feed them content. And a lot of the content that you feed them pertains directly to your voluntary thoughts and speech and your actions. And then if you pathologize those by lying, so if you say things that you know not to be true, or you don't say things that you know to be true when you need to, which is more common, and if you act in ways that you consider reprehensible, then you pathologize all of those autonomous systems that guide you. It's like you're programming them badly. You're building an AI system inside yourself, really, and in some sense that is what you're doing, that has very bad training data. And so the output it produces won't guide you properly. And so you don't want to pathologize your guidance systems. It's a really bad idea. So that's why you have to not lie. And maybe that's also why you have to say what you have to say. And you have to say it clearly as well. And you have to learn how to do that. So that's one of the ways of getting your conscience straightened out. And then you have to have a dialogue with your conscience. And you might ask, it's like, okay, well, what should I do? Or what should I do this, or should I not do this? So let's say you're thinking, should I not do this in the case of a temptation? Maybe you have a chance to develop a new relationship, and you're excited about it and apprehensive about it and afraid of it, and you don't know how to sort out all those feelings. And the first thing is you really have to want to sort them out. That's why you have to orient yourself to something that's a genuine up, the star above the horizon. You have to really want things to be straight, and you have to have thought that through, and you have to know what it means for things not to be straight. And really what it means is that you're headed for hell in one way or another. And if you understand that it's enough, maybe it's enough to scare you straight, you really got to think that through. Then you got to think about how much better it would be if you aimed up. And that really has to kind of permeate your whole being. And so then you're oriented that way. You're oriented up, and you're deciding that it's okay to try to tell the truth. And then you can start to rely on this dialogue with your conscience. But both of you have to learn, and you're going to make mistakes along the way. You know, that's okay. You can say, well, I'm going to try this without being certain that it's right. You can even say, I'm going to say this without being certain that it's correct. Like if you're arguing with your wife or your husband or your sister or your father, and you have an idea about what might be going on, you can say, look, here's my idea about what's going on. Who knows what that idea might be contaminated with? Like maybe I'm putting it forward just because I'm too proud or arrogant or angry or fearful or whatever. That's possible. Let's see if we can figure that out. But you can offer it tentatively and both have at it. That's what you do if it's a hypothesis, right? You both have at it and see if it's an idea that's worthy of keeping. And you do that with your conscience. And then you move forward. There's a technique in behavioral psychology called psychotherapy called collaborative empiricism. So let's say that you and I have been sitting down and we decide that you're going to try something new this week. Like maybe you're agoraphobic and you're having a hard time in a parking lot. And so getting out of the car and going to the grocery store. So maybe we say, well, you drive to the grocery store and you're just going to walk halfway halfway from your car to the door. And that's good enough for, like, do that every second day for a week. And then come back and let's talk about it. So that's collaborative empiricism. You're running a little experiment. So you think, well, your conscience is guiding you towards something. You take a tentative step in that direction. And then you check and see, well, did what I wanted to have happen occur as an outcome? That's the crucial question. And that's the crucial question for behavioral truth, right? That's the pragmatic perspective. Did what I want to have happen as a consequence of my framework of interpretation and my action? If the answer is yes, then I have not invalidated it, right? That's the pragmatic philosophy in a nutshell, and it's very, very smart. So you have a dialogue with your conscience that never ends, and hopefully it gets wiser, and you get wiser. And that's the dialogue that Jung talked about between the conscious and the unconscious, between your fantasy life, say, the life that's sort of underneath you as a conscious being, like the life that's part of your biological platform, the biological platform that somehow miraculously gives rise to your consciousness. You have a dialogue with that. We're always in dialogue. We're always in dialogue, right, with everything. So pursue that.